All right, let's get started. Hi there, and welcome to the US Web Design System monthly call for Dog Days of Summer, August 2020. My name is Dan Williams, and I'm the USWDS product lead. Thanks for being here. We've got a really great hour planned for you today. First, I'd like to mention that we're recording this monthly call, and as always, we post these recordings to YouTube. Probably what you'll see on YouTube is just the slides, but turn off your video if you don't want even the slightest chance of your face appearing on camera. We'll be posting links and references into the chat as we go along, and everyone is encouraged to ask questions in the chat at any time. If any member of our team can answer your question in the chat, we'll do so. Otherwise, there'll be some time at the end for question and answer at the end of the hour. So be sure to introduce yourself in the chat as well. It's nice to know who's here. You can just your name and where you're coming from. And with that, let's get started. As I said, we've got a good call ready to go today. First, we've got a bumper crop of site launches. And then we're going to spend a little time with Release Notes Live, looking at some of the new work in USWDS 2.8.1. And then I'll harass everyone about updating their banners. And after that light hectoring, we'll get to something a bit more fun for the rest of the hour, UX debt. And at the end, we should have some time for a little discussion and Q&A. So without any further ado, let's jump right into site launches. First up, FEMA.gov. USWDS site from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Thank you, FEMA. And next, FLETA.gov, the home of Federal Law Enforcement Training Accreditation. And USTaxCourt.gov, brand new site for the United States Tax Court, just in time for the end of tax season. And we also have USWDS sites from GovLoans.gov and benefits.gov. The Minority Business Development Agency has a new USWDS site at mbda.gov. And the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act is supporting adult education and literacy at aefla.ed.gov. And finally, our friends at code.gov just improved the accessibility of their site with USWDS as well. Oh, what a month. Great work, everyone. A lot of good time and thought is going into improving these sites and services, and it's really heartening to see. And now, product updates. This Monday, we released USWDS 2.8.1. Wasn't a huge release, but it was a good patch release driven by your feedback on USWDS 2.8. So thanks for your help, and thanks to your help, we fixed a couple display issues with the combo box. We fixed a display bug with the combo box where custom combo box sizing wasn't reflected in the combo box input size. Now the combo box resizes as expected, no matter what you throw at it. And we also fixed a display bug with the combo box where neighboring combo box UI elements could overlap with the combo box dropdown. That was kind of ugly, and now it's gone. And, oops, let me go back. There it is. We have a new setting as of 2.8.1. Ta-da! Theme footer max width. As you might guess, now similar to the banner, you can set a max width for the footer in settings. Small victories, small but useful. And finally, we now fully support custom hex colors in link calculations. So in USWDS 2.8, we introduced some more intelligent theming tools that build and check link colors based off of your project settings. This helps the system pick good text and link colors based on theme background colors. But The link color tool didn't play well when teams used custom hex colors in their theme colors, instead of the much nicer and highly encouraged, but I understand is not always practical, USWDS system color tokens. So when you use system color tokens in your theme, this worked well. If you use custom hex, the system got confused. So now it's sort of, it works the way you might expect it to work. If your project theme uses USWDS system color tokens for its theme, the system will generate link hover colors that are one system color grade higher or lower than the link color, depending on the color of the background. For instance, if your link color is primary light and it's on a dark background, the primary light is defined as blue 40V actually in this case, the generated hover color will be one grade lighter in the same vivid range. It would be blue 30V. And this is what was working in USWDS 2.8.0. But if your primary light color token was defined as a custom hex, like this one, FEEDOO, then the system didn't know what to do. And now it does. It will just choose one grade higher or lower in your theme palette. In this case, choosing the value primary lighter as the hover. And that's how link colors and the link color generator works in Design System 2.8.1. So if you use custom hex, try this out. Hopefully it should work just as I say. If it doesn't, let us know. And then coming up soon in Design System 2.9, we'll be introducing what we're currently calling the USWDS Anchor, which is a special very bottom of the page footer used for required government links, plus introducing a time picker and a progress bar for multi-step content. You can follow our progress on GitHub and on our product roadmap. Now is when I remind you that we released new Gov banner text in our last release, and you should update it on your sites and projects. We introduced this change to be as clear as possible that trustworthiness for a government site is based on the combination of an official top-level domain, like .gov or .mil, and a secure HTTPS connection. And it's important that we try to keep this message in sync. The primary text in the closed banner remains unchanged, an official website of the United States government, here's how you know. And then sort of in the expanded banner, official websites use .gov. A .gov website belongs to an official government organization in the United States. And secure .gov websites use HTTPS. A lock or HTTPS means you've safely connected to the .gov website. Share sensitive information only on official secure websites. So that's the new text. We have a version for .mil sites as well. And we have Spanish language versions of both the .gov and the .mil language. So we need your help to get the word out. If you use the banner, update your banner. Or get more information and let the right folks know that there is a banner content update at the USWDS website. That's designsystem.digital.gov/components/banner. We'll be talking a little bit more about this over the next month or so because we really want to get this word out and we want to get the banner updated across as many sites as possible. So identifying, necessary improvements, figuring out how and when to get these improvements done, this kind of responsibility, it segues well into the primary focus of this call, which is paying down UX debt. So to introduce the concept of UX debt and to get practical on how to address it, I'd like to introduce Suran De Silva. He's the design system lead at the Internal Revenue Service. Suran is a user experience advocate, reimagining the taxpayer experience by creating innovative, data-driven, human-centered designs. He has over 15 years experience as a developer, a designer, and a product manager in the federal, nonprofit, and commercial markets. So I'm really pleased that we're able to have Suran with us here today, and I'm excited to learn from him. Suran, welcome, and take it away. I'm going to stop sharing and let you share your screen.
Thanks, Dan. Let me bring that up. Can you see my
There it
screen?
is.
Oh, awesome. Great. So hi, everyone. My name is Ryan. I was going to talk to you today about UXDET. I gave a 5-minute presentation at a small GSA event about a year ago on this, and I was asked to present again, except this time take a little bit more time. But I'm just kidding. There was actually a lot of information that I couldn't cover in the lightning talk, including giving some examples of things that we're doing or have done at the IRS to help resolve some UX debt. Before we get into this talk, I do want to mention that UX debt is more of a conceptual topic, and I know this is the monthly US Web Design System call, and this topic doesn't strictly relate to design systems, but it could be applied to any site or service that you provide. That being said, I do help manage the design system at the IRS, along with my coworker, Erin Mitchell, who's watching in Boston. So I thought I'd try to relate some of the concepts back to things that we're doing within our design system, and hopefully that'll give you guys some tips of how you might be able to apply it to your process or work. So here we go. I wanted to put the statement out there that we want our sites to be the best, but they are not there yet. And I'll go out on a limb and say that everyone on this call thinks that this is true for whatever site or service you're managing. I mean, the mere fact that we're on the Web Design System call shows that you have an interest in improving and learning. The statement has 2 key assumptions. The first one is pretty basic, that we don't want our sites to be terrible. At least I hope we don't. I can't imagine anybody waking up and driving to work, or maybe walking 20 steps to your laptop in these current days, and hoping to make a more difficult experience for the thousands or millions of users that are using your products. We want our sites to be the best version of themselves. Sometimes that's not the perception that people have of government services, but I think we're all in the business of trying to get to that point of where we can surprise and delight our users with a great experience. The other assumption is that our sites aren't currently perfect. Now you might be thinking, Suran, you're from the IRS, you're telling me your sites aren't perfect right now? I'll admit that they aren't there yet, but we do have a bunch of dedicated people that are working to improve all the products that we have. It's a big undertaking, as I'm sure most of you all in the industry know, but it's something that we're trying to get to. And that difference between where our sites are currently and where we, or more importantly, our users want them to be, is what I was going to talk about today. So this is what we'll cover. I broke it up into 4 sections. First, we'll go over what UXDebt is and how it appears on our sites. Then go into some common causes of debt. And then we'll try to talk about different ways to fix it. And here I'll show you examples of what we're doing at the IRS. And then we'll end with some helpful resources. There's a lot out there on the web about UXDebt, and I tried to add relevant links and resources throughout the presentation that I think you might find helpful if you want to dig deeper into this topic. And then we should have some time for questions at the end. So first, what is it? We covered it a bit on the earlier slide where we were saying it's a measure of the difference between a product's or service's current state and the optimal experience that it should provide users. But in hearing that, and if you're practicing agile development, where it's all about incremental releases and you're not trying to get your products perfect before shipping, you'll realize that all products will have some amount of UX debt. Nothing's going to be perfect on the first release. And you're right. I will say that UX debt is normal, necessary, and even good. It goes back to the core agile principles of build, measure, learn, where we try to put something out incrementally and continuously get feedback instead of trying to deliver everything all at once at the end. This works especially well with software, as it's easier to get product upgrades out as opposed to hardware or other physical goods where you want your product to be as close to perfect before you begin shipping it. I like this example pictured because I feel it's a more realistic example of how we develop digital products. We have a rough idea of what we want our products to be and the purpose they serve before building it. And we're typically not jumping from a scooter to a car in terms of product scope. But you can see in this third example that when we're on step 1, we know that there's a lot that we need to improve. The back half of the car is just undercarriage. We probably should optimize that in some way. So why even talk about UX debt if we know it's a normal part of Agile and we understand that our sites aren't where they need to be? Well, it's important for a couple of reasons. First, we want to be able to acknowledge and be able to quantify the amount of work that's needed to make our products better. And when we're speaking across the organization or to senior executives, it's better to have some type of measure to define the amount of work that we're facing. It also helps to focus your organization around this concept. This is helpful when you're trying to identify which features to prioritize or even make the case for redesign or redevelopment. Most organizations are familiar with the concept of technical debt. Technical debt was coined by Ward Cunningham back in the early 90s. And if you don't know Ward, he's an individual that really pushed the software development industry forward. He developed the first wiki, made a lot of initial contributions to advancing software design patterns. In describing technical debt, Ward states that shipping first-time code is a lot like going into debt. A little debt speeds development, so as long as it's paid back promptly with a rewrite. The danger occurs when debt is not repaid. So essentially, we're taking on debt and making a calculated trade-off to ship products faster. The danger he refers to is that if you ignore it for too long and let it build up, like most debt, you'll be left powerless and to make meaningful impacts in the product. For example, one page on your site that has confusing content or loads slowly might not be that terrible, but a lot of pages facing that same issue will cause people to quickly abandon your site. So when the debt is not repaid and it builds up, you could suffer from lower adoption rates, diminished customer satisfaction, and overall lower confidence in your organization. So let's take a look at an example of how some of my colleagues at the IRS tackled UX debt. The IRS has an online account system that allows taxpayers to access personal tax information. It was first created as a single page MVP with the purpose of showing taxpayers how much money they owed. A little backstory was that the call volumes that the IRS was facing for this one question was overwhelming. And so developing an online portal made sense, both from a business standpoint of freeing up call center reps to handle other tax questions, but also from giving taxpayers the ability to get instant access to their personal information. So you can see on this application that taxpayers have the ability to see the money that they owe to the IRS. And then through user testing and research, it made sense to have the option to pay off that amount. And the balance could be a culmination of multiple different years. So it's important to show that the taxpayer, which year each balance related to and a breakdown for that year. And in a similar vein, it made sense to show recent payments made. And through research, it was determined that this was also a logical place for people to access tax record information. And as you can see, as we're building more and more features, this single page application was getting overwhelmed. We didn't have the flexibility to add new capabilities, and this much information was not only hard for desktop users to take in, but it was especially so hard for mobile users and taxpayers using assistive technologies. So even though we were adding features based on user feedback, we were piling on UX debt because we weren't looking at the application holistically. To address this, some of my colleagues, led by Stephen Chovanec, our account design lead, designed and tested an updated multi-page application. This redesign addressed the debt by allowing us to group separate features together logically, addressed concerns of information overload by allowing users to, by allowing us to use progressive disclosure, which is a technique to improve usability by providing more detailed information as the user needs it. So here we see the initial choices the taxpayer faces by deciding whether they want to do something with their balance, or if they have one, or access tax record information. We also gave ourselves the ability to, using a tab view, to add new capabilities in the future, and it followed along with our IRS design guide as well. One final note on this, I encourage everyone to look into creating their own IRS account. because you get access to a lot of important tax information. And a majority of people are able to sign up pretty quickly if they have the appropriate identity verification information. And that helps in case you need tax record information for a loan or some other type of need. Okay, so we covered what UX debt is and even a little bit of what causes it. Let me show you a few more examples of other potential causes of UX debt. Here's a list from Nielsen Norman of potential causes. And as you can see, the causes can be in any phase of the typical process. It can be in the research phase by not doing user testing, or the design phase by disregarding style guides or designing by committee, and even the development phase with QA testing and dealing with legacy code. To this list, I would even add inadequate research, where we could be testing the wrong thing, overly complex backend processes where it's impossible to make things work for the user without internal organizational changes, or even just the changing customer need. If you notice, these causes are a lot different than the initial cause that we were describing before, where we were saying UX debt is a natural part of agile development. Here, we're dealing with potential deficiencies in our process or organization. That could be contributing to the UX debt as opposed to just a natural move forward. So it's important to look at why your sites aren't optimized and ask yourself if it was a compromise you made knowingly to launch sites faster and truly build, measure, and learn, or if it's a symptom of a larger issue that you need to address. The key point here is that quality is a bar, not a trade-off. You've got to push for good UX. It's easy to overlook, and the trade-off is not always visible. It's hard to measure sometimes if a small element change will actually provide a better experience. But we need to establish what type of quality we want in our products and ensure that we're pushing for it. There's a great article by Julie Zhao where she talks about not really wanting to be the person in design reviews that's always saying, no, this is not right, and this needs to be fixed. Knowing that by not signing off on things, there's potential for delays. But honestly, we owe it to our users to do so and not to incur the debt. The scale of the products we work on and then being used by so many people just require us to make sure that this quality is being met. All right, so we know we have an idea of what it is and how it's caused. So how should we fix UX debt? These are 3 steps, and it's a variation of a Nielsen Norman approach, except I thought I'd use alliteration because it's fun and hopefully a little bit easier to remember. But reveal, record, and resolve. So first, reveal. I think it's important to use your site. And I know this goes against the mantra of you are not the user, but I encourage you to use your site whenever possible. Whenever I have a tax question or I hear of a tax question, I go to the irs.gov site and I see if I can find an answer using the site alone. I wouldn't use these findings to make changes in the site in case I find something wrong, but I would consider that using them as a hypothesis for future research, which brings me to the next point. Conducting regular user testing sessions. It will help you identify new UX debt. As I mentioned before, even if you think your site is perfectly optimized, customer needs and expectations can change. And through user testing, you're more than likely to find problems that you'll never be able to solve. I mean, there'll be more than enough. Finally, listen for key phrases when you're working. In his book, Lean UX, Jeff Gotthelf says the biggest lie in software is phase 2. So be cautious of those. We'll get to it later promises. Here's something that we're doing at the IRS to reveal potential issues in our design system. This is a UI element score sheet that a colleague of mine, Bridget Sinikoff, developed to test our elements. Essentially, what happens here is a person from our design team would sit in with product researchers doing user testing and watch how taxpayers will interact with the elements as they go through the user test. Disregarding the flow and other areas related to the product, their focus would specifically be on the elements themselves. They would watch mouse movements and listen to what's being said, And we'd even provide researchers conducting the test certain probes to try and elicit responses to specific elements that we might have questions on. Our design team member would use this spreadsheet with all the elements on our design system listed out, and then make notes of how the subject would interact with those elements and note any difficulty they had. It's been a really nice tool that we've been able to use to kind of dig up issues that we've seen in the different ways that we're styling elements. So after you reveal your UX stat, be sure to record your results. Consider clustering your user testing results into themes, not by sessions. I know we probably all have reports on a computer where it says user testing summary of results January 2020, and then user testing summary of results February 2020, and so on. But consider pulling out the key findings and group those into themes and use that as a thing that you look back on. You might find something like findability might be keep coming up, and you can use that to see the history of all the issues from past user tests. You'll also want to record how details around severity and impact and the estimated time to fix this issue affect the debt or the issue that you're seeing. This will help you when you get around to resolving the debt. Different types of UX debt will have a greater impact on your product depending on the journeys or user goals they impact. So some user journeys are more important than others. And while you might be able to live with a design issue that causes a table to render poorly on an isolated page, that same problem when someone is setting up a payment plan will likely have a greater impact on your users and your business. Catalog your components. This is something we do within our design system. Many times we're just unaware of how many variations are being used in our products. So conduct regular audits and record how many different types of variations you have. Things like login screens or search boxes can be used widely across your organization's different products, and trying to tame that is always a good thing, or just at least audit that. And then consider adding a UX stat label to those issues in your project management software. This is helpful because sometimes small design issues, which are small in scope, have a tendency to disappear or live at the bottom of the backlog with a lot of other features that need to be addressed going first. But having this label allows you to see all the UX stat in your application when it comes time to resolve. And then finally, resolve. Make sure you prioritize your debt and know what's important and what's less important. Like I mentioned before, use your product strategy, look to business goals, and user research to identify the most critical journeys and prioritize your debt accordingly. To ensure that UX debt is actually worked on, you can either dedicate a few story points each sprint to tackle the debt, or you could devote a quarterly sprint solely just to improving issues that are marked UX stat if you have a lot. Next, you typically see pair programming listed as a way to improve UX stat, but I'm a firm believer in getting groups to look at all the phases together. I know my colleagues working on different products at the IRS do a good job of inviting developers to see the user research. We have both researchers and designers in our design reviews, and it helps to have designers understand the technical limitations of various frameworks by working with developers. So whenever possible, try to bring these groups together. Finally, like code reviews, design reviews add an additional filter for assessing work before it gets pushed out into the wild, which should prevent UX debt from accumulating in the first place. And as mentioned before, ensure that we're setting a high quality bar for quality. I host a weekly design council at the IRS with lead designers across our organization and a few key researchers and developers. And we come together to not only present designs for critique, but also to see if others can use similar design approaches for other products, with the goal of having a consistent experience across our organization. Finally, some resources. We've been talking about UX debt related to a single application. This article and associated tool provides a great resource to um, assess UX data across your organization. I'm a sucker for a good spreadsheet, and this one's terrific. It's very detailed, and it came in handy as I was working on the report for the website modernization section of the 21C idea. The IRS has a number of public digital products, and this gave me a good rubric to score our sites based on findability, content, and other areas. And honestly, it works great for a single page application as well. It can provide you with a consistent metric of your UX debt based on those factors, and even give you a score so you can kind of measure and see how you're doing as you tackle some of this debt. Um, Finally, here is a list of resources that I used to put together this talk. Again, there's a lot of information out there, and I encourage you all to take a look at what others have said about this topic. It's funny, I'd say 99% of these articles on UX debt mentions Ward Cunningham and technical debt, and that's partly why I felt compelled to add to the slide. But honestly, there's a ton of good resources in there. And that is it. I'd love to hear any questions that you all have about UX debt and maybe things that we're doing at the IRS.
Yeah, thank you, Suran. There are a couple questions that are beginning to come in through the chat, and hopefully as we address those, that'll begin to prompt a few more as well. And so the first one I see here is from AIGA Seattle, and was wondering if you could share a link or something else to the UI element score sheet template that you showed.
Yeah, I don't have a link currently, but I can try to get that to you in some way. But essentially what we did with the score sheet is in that first column, we just put down all our elements that we have in our design system. And then essentially for whatever product that we're testing, we gray out the elements that might not be in there. So I think this is probably used for some type of form. So it doesn't have like a link or a spinner or date field in there. And then we try to mention where these elements are located in each of the pages. So it could be like on the primary page or one of the wizard pages. And then we create columns for each of the participants. So here you'll see like P3 and P6 because we break it up by desktop user testing sessions and mobile user testing sessions. So then we have we mark whether the participant actually used a component, and then if they did use a component, if they had any difficulty, and then any types of notes. One of the things that came up is like some people don't think that our step indicator is actually clickable, and they might mention that, or they might only use the component if they've been prompted by the moderator or something like that. But it's just a great way to just kind of track how our elements are being used, because it's always hard to test for specific elements. You can test like a product, but like how do you test a button?
So then with when your team is using the element score sheet, what tends to be the next step? Do you collect some sort of top line findings and then sort of review them occasionally to see what tends to be bubbling up, or what tends to be what you do as a result of this?
Yeah, so after these test sessions, we usually have a debrief and we go over what we found and try to find some trends in what we've seen. And for the step indicator example, we've seen it like if we've seen it in one product, and we might have even seen it in other products, then we'll bring that into a future sprint and try to address that there. So we have the baseline understanding that users are having difficulty, they might not understand this is clickable. Let's try and try to iterate on different designs and or stylings that might make it a little bit more, provide more of a indicator that these are clickable, and see what we can do there.
I think that that seems to be maybe one of the challenges is uh, as you're identifying things and as you're uh, being more clear about what UX debt you're accumulating, then being able to get to the next step of being able to do something about it, to be able to actively identify the time or to give it, as you say, sort of story points in a sprint or a dedicated sprint to get it to rise to the level of actually addressing this thing, and perhaps just being able to see it, to see those UX debt labeled issues rising and rising in your filter results, maybe also helps you understand like your UX balance a little bit. But yeah, can you maybe speak again to like, you know, those things that help you then prioritize and actually make those UX debt things actionable?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So I think as you're seeing more, so one of the problems with UX set is you have this, you'll use the site or other will use the site, and you'll know that it's not quite right, and it's kind of sometimes it's hard to um, identify or describe what the issues are. But as you're tracking these issues and you're adding labels to it, you're right. You'll start to see a larger group of these labels show up, and that'll give you the yeah. And then if obviously if you prioritize and you try to tackle it during a sprint or dedicate some story points to it during a sprint, you'll at least try to like knock that down a little bit. But I think the important thing is seeing it and labeling it, because I think sometimes too often you might know it and then it'll just be like a bug, like, oh, this um, this small design fix needs to happen at some point. But typically when we're developing products, I think we focus a lot on the features and the new features that are coming out, and sometimes these small design fixes that could build up kind of go by the wayside, and you don't realize it at a certain point.
It seems like there's sometimes a challenge in keeping both that micro eye on what might be seen as sort of a small thing, and then the macro focus on how that small thing scales out and touches all of these other elements, or how it affects different parts of a user journey, and how to see it both from the micro level and the macro level to adequately prioritize it uh, can be a challenge, and something that really helps you understand its impact, perhaps. Do you think that there'll always be UX debt? You know, when we're working, no matter the environment. This is a question that Vivian asks. Are you suggesting that that you could ever get to a place where there's no debt, or will there always be some?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's always going to be some level of debt. I can't imagine the perfect site being out there. And
If you find it, send a link.
yes. So I imagine that we're always going to have to be updating our sites, and yeah, even if we think we've tackled most, like I mentioned, there's changing customer needs. Where we thought was perfect before, new technologies pop up, and we have to adapt and adapt our sites to face that. And people are going to have different preferences as they use our products, and we just have to continuously look at our products and evaluate it, and just continuously reveal and record.
It seems like a big part of understanding and addressing UX debt is uncovering it, and a lot of that is based on research and usability testing, and a lot of very UX focused activities, very human-centered design focused activities. If someone, this has come from Janella and from Sherry, for someone who's maybe on a UX team of one, What do you think that someone like that can do to begin to address UX debt in their projects?
Um, I think the same thing. I think it's important, and I have been on those teams of one or two, people just managing the site and doing everything from the design or the research, design, and development. So I understand how it is, and you're juggling a lot of different things. I think it's just important to record it and make sure that you have that backlog available. So this way you can, when you have time, you can go back to it. And then if there's a way that you can prioritize it, or if you have a lull at any point, you can try to tackle your most pressing UX debt based on whatever those most important journeys are, or yeah, that your users have. So kind of go at it that way. Just continue to record it, and then eventually try to go back to it and then prioritize that debt.
Yes, any research is good research. Any usability testing is good usability testing. Zaid asks, how do you feel about web usability audits that are externally produced by, say, like watchdog usability organizations or usability experts? I don't know exactly what Zaid might be referring to here, but do you see outside audits that come in that might affect what you're tracking?
Yeah, at the IRS, there we do have presentations. So we work with a number of different vendors that look at our products and different products, from our .gov site to our different applications that we have within. And there's always nuggets out there that when they present, that's good to take back. Sometimes again, it's kind of like, it's good to get that information and then look at it and understand what they're trying to say. But then sometimes it requires more testing or more research on your own. But yeah, I'm always curious and interested to hear what other people have to say about the sites that we're managing. So I don't view that as like they don't understand our sites or anything like that. It's always good to get that feedback.
Yeah, it seems like it's just another feedback point of an important one, and often usually at a maybe sort of at a high level. Like probably the feedback you would get from something wouldn't be at the granular level of this UI element score sheet or something like that. It might be this page is not addressing contrast issues, or this table isn't resizing well. So I think those are part of the challenge of any of these sort of priority and decision making things, is sort of understanding how the little things fit in with the big things, and making sure that you're not forgetting the little things, because those things bubble up into big things. The quote, sort of the biggest lie in software is phase two, is definitely funny, and I can understand that in a couple of different ways, knowing that I always feel like there's a phase two or something on the horizon, and so how do you think you would think about phase two? How should we think about phase two? Because phase two, you want to think of phase two like it does have to be real. When you show that MVP truck sort of moving from just the undercarriage in the back to a roadster in the front, like there are some phases there that are realistic.
Yeah.
Is there a way to be more practical or more action oriented around how to get to phase two, how to make it real?
Yeah. So I think I guess the point about the phase two is that I've been guilty of this in the past, of being faced with a problem and being like, oh, that's something interesting. We're working on this and we need to get this out and like try to resolve this. Let's tackle this issue that has come up at another point. And I think that those are the key phrases that you have to watch out for. I mean, it's perfectly fine to punt for another sprint or something like that. But I think it's important to make sure that we're recording that and ensuring that we get back to it. The phase two is of something that obviously, yeah, we want to continue to improve it, and then whatever approach you take, whether it's going to be a new release down the line or something like that, I think there you have to just prioritize all the issues that you want to tackle for that next release. Obviously, probably working with the business or and trying to merge those business needs with the user needs, and then trying to figure out what's most important. In this example that you see here with the bottom, yeah, the truck in the first step just has the undercarriage in the back, and I guess they don't know what they want to do next. Whether they want to obviously transport something, but they don't know if it's people or other things. But try to take those incremental steps as you're building out your product a little bit more. So I think, yeah, making sure that you record this information, and it's always going to go back to making sure you record this. That's the important part. And then once you have it recorded, at least you can kind of see everything that you're facing, and then make the determination of what's going to be the next step in your release.
Perhaps related to this is that idea of quality being a bar and not a trade-off. And that makes me want to ask, like, how do you think of quality? How do you establish that quality bar, or know when you're getting over it? So you know, how do you know if that bar is changing? What level of quality do you aim for?
Yeah, I think that's going to be that really has to be something that you and your team decide what you're comfortable with putting out there. I it'll vary. And as the person before mentioned that they're on a team of one, that's, there's so much that you have to get done, and you have deadlines that you really need to deliver and deliver for. But it's honestly something that you need to work with your team to figure out what that bar is and what you're going to be okay with. You got to make sure, like, you have to make sure, like, from the content, from the design, styling, the development and everything, there's so much, but it's really hard to say for like across organizations. I think that's something more of an individual group has to determine when they're putting out those products. But I think one thing that I can say is that if there's something that you just know is not right or just doesn't make sense, like right off the bat, I think stepping up and just getting everyone to like look at it is important. Like, don't put out things that are confusing off the bat. Like, that's one thing that we're trying to do with our design system, and making sure that our best practices, at least as we write them out, is as clear as possible. And then as get feedback from others as they're using it, and determine whether that still works if it makes sense for other people to use.
I know it's something I've struggled with when thinking about MVP and releasing sort of a minimum viable product, like understanding like when it has achieved that level, or if it, and I know that I've worked on teams that have tried to built something where like we can release this, and I will think this thing is totally, this is not minimum yet, and there's a tension there in sort of understanding like when something has achieved that threshold. And it feels like in a way part of it is around building sort of consensus standards, and part of it is doing that enough usability testing at that phase to understand even more from that user's perspective whether it has cleared that threshold or not. And
Yeah.
I know for me, coming from a often from a visual design perspective, I'm like, this thing doesn't look right. But then, you know, we'll test it, and it's like, it has already made somebody, just the fact that some of the functionality exists has made someone's life so much better. I'm like, okay, I'll chill on the button for now, because like this is clearly getting the job done.
That's a
So
great point. Yeah, defining what minimum is actually a great, yeah, it's a great phrase.
it's hard.
Yeah.
Um, and so I I've found definitely quite a bit that's in this presentation that I know feels extremely practical and useful to me, and that I would like to take uh, for myself and begin to apply to the way that we work with the U.S. web design system. I know that one of the challenges for us is really, you know, understanding how well the design system can be used sort of across implementers. It's it's very difficult to do something like a cross-agency audit of the way that every place uses our buttons or uses something like that. So it's a difficult and an interesting place for the U.S. web design system to be, to really think about where we can do the most to help teams build things build things better and easier. And so there's a lot for me to, I think, dig into here and think about what we can apply at the US web design system layer that then will be useful to teams that are using that to build out their own project, agency, et cetera, specific design systems. And I want to be able to think that that some of the UX debt that we'll try to fix at the web design system layer can be able to sort of cascade into the experience that teams use it, and into the experience of the folks that actually use the things that they build. So there's a lot of layers, and this is a good challenge, I think, to be able to keep all of the different layers from small interactions, micro interactions, through to user journeys, to keep them all related and in perspective, so that we're making good decisions that really have a strong experience impact down the road. So it's a great challenge to us, and a great way of thinking about it, and I really appreciate it, Suran.
Yeah, great. I'm happy to do that, talk to you about it. And I will totally recommend this resource about enterprise UX debt for organizations that are using, it's not so much design systems, but I think it's a great score sheet to see and to calculate your UX debt. I think it sometimes comes in handy. It's good practical information in there.
Great. Thank you so much, Suran. And I will check to see if there's any more sort of straggling queues that come into the Q&A queue. And if there are, I can ask them here in the last minute that we have. Otherwise, I'll say that we will hopefully be able to share out some resources as we do a follow-up for this call. We'll probably send an email out with, we'll try to package up some of these resources. And then if you had sort of a question that you weren't able to ask here, you can always ask them later. You can ask them sort of in the USWDS public Slack, and I'll put up a slide that has some of that info up. If you don't mind stopping your share, Suran, I'm going to throw up one more slide. And let me see if I can do that. Cancel and window, and there we go and present. It's always fun to hear someone like talking through sharing a slide, but there you have it. Yes, so this is these are some of the places where you can talk with the design system in the USWDS public channel, which you can access via digital.gov/communities/USWDS. Digitalgov posted a link to the USWDS email sort of earlier in the chat, and they can post it in here if it's not already in there. You can get in touch with us via email. You can ask us questions via issues in GitHub as well. There's lots of different ways to get in touch with us, and if there's any way that we can help you, please do reach out. Next month, we're going to be talking about a few new components that I hinted at in the slides. And ooh, here's one. If we for the last 1 minute, let's see if we can address it in 1 minute. How might there be an alignment between UX debt and tech debt? Are UX debt and tech debt aligned in any meaningful way? That's from Saeed.
Yeah, so I think tech debt is probably more like, I always imagine like backend systems and things like that that are building the framework that can cause your product to not operate. I think there is a lot of similarity between it because I think that could affect the user experience as well. Sometimes like complicated systems, like slow load times and things like that will definitely affect the user experience. I think the difference might be sometimes UX that is not related to the hardware sometimes, or the code specifically. There could be other things that cause that issue. It could be content that's not clear, or just designs that don't work. There's some things that might not be related to code that so that might be where it differs a little bit from the tech debt.
All right. Well, thanks again, Suran. It's really great to have you here and talking with us. This was a really interesting and informative presentation, and I will be coming back to learn more from it ASAP. Thank you, everyone, for coming today, and I hope to see you again at the next Design System Monthly Call in September. Thanks so much.